Welcome to Game On, the show where you and I get to discuss the biggest stories happening in the world of football. Of course, we get to focus on the DStv Premiership, the Premier League, as well as Shane's favorite league, the Bundesliga. I'm not alone. My name is Masemola. I'm joined by Shane Mcgregor, a man who loves the Soweto derby, but a man that might be slightly bruised given the result that we saw this weekend. Shane, how are you doing?
Good news, thanks, and welcome to the Game On family.
Thank you so much. I'd like to talk about the Soweto derby, not necessarily the result, but how you are feeling about your former team, Kaizer Chiefs.
Well, going into a derby, it's always difficult. The Chiefs had the upper hand over Pirates going into this one, but unfortunately, one of those things happened. Pirates got a goal. I said last week, Pirates are very good at going one up and then just defending, and that happened. Once again, we look at the game, it was, for me, disappointing, not just because Chiefs lost. It was disappointing in the style of play, the whole football on the day, and also, once again, the lack of goals. This is a big thing for me, It's a South African thing, but in the derby, you expect big goals, you expect 3-4 goals in the derby game. Unfortunately, once again, we were disappointed.
Most certainly. As a South African football fan, I'm sure on Sunday, you were smiling quite broadly with Mamelodi Sundowns being the first winners of the African Football League.
Yeah, brilliant to them. We look at them and we look at the way they gain. They've taken football in this country to a new level, and in Africa. I mean, champions of that, the very first AFL League game. So brilliant for them. They were really good for the game, and they were worth their money worth. They really did well. 1-0 down, 1-0 up, 2-0 up. And then they just managed the game. There was a lot to say about that, the way they managed the game, but that's the way you go. You get ahead and you just make sure that you stay ahead.
Most certainly. Let's leave that conversation behind, heading into the international break. There are so many conversations that I would love to have with you. We know that the international break brings a few changes to club football, and there's a lot of questions that people might have. But before we get into that, we have to send our condolences to the Chikova family as well. I know that you've spent some time at SuperSport United, a man that joined the club in 2014 and unfortunately has passed on.
Yeah, unfortunately, he was a big cog of the team. He helped the goalkeepers a lot. He only played 7 games, but he was behind the scenes helping the goalkeepers, training them. Rowan is one of them. Williams is one of them. So he was a big part of that. He got those goalkeepers going. He got them fired up, and he got them working well. So yeah, condolences to all.
Yeah. In terms of sad news, we know that in South African football, if you don't get results, you are shown the door. Brandon Trutter, a man that wasn't in charge of their last 2 games, and we saw this week that Sekhukhune United have made a decision. They don't want him a part of the club anymore. Your thoughts?
Yeah, these things happen. We all know you're only as good as your last game. And in the beginning of the year, we spoke about a game that went by where they got a goal, they conceded a goal. And, unfortunately for him, the results haven't been game. And it's a result-driven game. That's the big thing. As a coach, when you sign a contract, you're only as good as your last game. You're only as good as your next game. And unfortunately for him, it caught up. He couldn't turn it around in time for them. It's one of those things. It's a money game. You need to be getting results, and he wasn't doing that. And he couldn't turn it around, unfortunately. So they've parted ways. But at the end of the day, he gave his all. He did well for them last season, if you remember how well he did last season. And as I said, you can't rely on what happened last season. You've got to be going on your next game. And unfortunately for him, he's out of a job. I don't think he'll be out of a job for too long. We all know South African football. The coaches move around, jump around. And
Recycling.
Yeah, you'll find a club sooner rather than later.
You spoke about turning results around. I know that you were a former coach as well. I'd like to get into the psychology. What do you do when things aren't simply going your way and you're trying everything and the players simply aren't getting the results on the field?
The big thing I found, and I learned fairly early on in my career as a coach, that when things aren't going your way, you as a coach, you can't be trying too hard. Now, I know this is going to sound ridiculous. You can't be pushing the players, and you can't be getting their psyche up all the time and saying, listen, guys, we've got to change this. We've got to be doing this. For me, what I found worked for me is, as a coach, when things weren't going my way, I started doing things differently. training was going to be different. For instance, I would give the guys 3 days off where normally they would be training every day.
Sure.
And people would say, but why would you do that? It's a lot to do with your whole mindset and the way you are. When you come down to training and when you're doing your normal training sessions, when you're doing everything normally, players are thinking about the next game all the time and they're concentrating on that. And sometimes that works in the opposite way. I'm not saying that they must go out and party and carry on. Just say, take your mind off the game, take your mind off all the problems within the team, just relax and come back refreshed and let's start all over again. That sometimes works. Doing something different, team building, taking them to doing stupid things, things like that always works well with players. I know in the UK that sometimes when things aren't going well, the guys go away to a holiday, somewhere sunny where it's warm. Just little differences, and it makes a big difference to me. Different coaches got different things. That's just the way I worked.
And also the difference in terms of when you played football way back in the day, now we're seeing like team psychologists and a whole mental staff being like brought into the club to ensure that the players are well taken care of. We have seen the story of Lyle Foster as well, talking about depression and the psychological side of the game. So I love what you mentioned in terms of breaking away from what the players are used to.
Yeah, it always just changes that cycle. That's the big thing for me, is to change the cycle. Once you're in a bad cycle and it's going week in, week out, and the pressure's building, you need to break that pressure. And psychologists are a big part of it. In our day, we didn't have those psychologists. That's why you had to go and do things differently. You had to change things. So, a team psychologist plays a big role in any sport at the moment. And let's say, while we're talking about that a certain cricket team obviously have changed their psychology. But these things happen, you've got to change the psychology. I see Chiefs have brought in a guy, a very well-respected psychologist. Let's just hope it works wonders for them.
Most certainly. The conversation does continue right here on Game On. We still have to dissect that KZN derby where we saw Amazulu getting the best of Golden Arrows, as well as jump into some EPL football. Stay tuned. This is Game On.